In this episode of our photography review show, we're gonna review over 61 photos from 25 photographers. Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of our photography review show. I hope you had a great week and that you're ready for another set of photography reviews. For those who don't know me, my name is Jakub and I'm a professional photographer based in West Sussex, England. Now for the past 2 or 3 years I've been reviewing photos from my friends and colleagues, and that's something what we decided to offer to our photography community here at Clever Photographer. Now it's been very successful, and for the last 6 months we've been receiving many photos from many photographers from all over the world. Now because it's been so successful, we were pushed to limit the entries to 1 or 2 photos per week per photographer, and for the same reason we also take the show and divide it between 2 or 3 different parts. We usually look at the landscape photography in the first part, then the mixed team photography in the second part, and we look at the rest of the photography styles in the third and final part. Now we're gonna do the same this week, but before we're gonna do that, I wanted to remind you about our Facebook photography group. It's called Clever Photographer, and it's a great space if you wanna come and join us, talk about photography. We answer your photos there, we run regular photography competitions, and we also review your photos throughout the week. So if you wanna join us, it's for free. All you need to do, head to Facebook, search for Clever Photographer Academy, and join us today. But now, because we have many photographers to look at, without any further ado, let's jump straight into it. And now it's time for the second part of the show, where we're gonna be looking at photographers with the mixed team photography. What it means? It means that basically we received from the same photographer things like portrait photography and landscape photography, or wildlife photography and landscape photography, and any of the combination, which does not allow us to put them in a very specific brackets like landscape photography or wildlife photography. So we have 8 photographers to look at, and let's jump and start with it right away. But before we gonna do that, I wanted to ask you to make sure that you like this video, that you comment below, and also make sure that you subscribe to our channel so we can continue creating content like this. So anyway, without any further ado, let's do this. Now we're looking at Cherie here, and Cherie, we have actually reviewed this photo before. I remember it quite specifically, and it was reviewed on 18th of October last year. So I will put somewhere in the corner here link to that episode, and you can check out the review there. So we will not look at the picture today, and we will look at this picture right here. So let's start with that, and let's have a look at the camera details. So this was captured with Nikon D7100. The lens was 150 to 600 millimeters, and from the camera settings, this was ISO 100, 320 millimeters, so quite nice zoom, f5.6 and 1/500th of a second. So looking at it like this, from a technical point of view, the setting is quite cool. I think that ISO 100 is always a good choice. f5.6, although there is not much at the back, give you a good depth of field, and 1/500th of a second to make sure that we have the movement on and everything is nice and sharp. Now when you zoom in, this part of the animal seems to be really well sharp. However, this part of the face has a touch of a softness on it, I have to say. It's not completely sharp. Now what I like is the pieces of the feather. I think that looks really cool. However, just something to kind of keep an eye on, maybe increasing the f-stop next time, or making sure that your focus point is really on the head of the animal. So that's about it from the technical point of view. Obviously kind of blue background. Talking about the composition, this picture is more as a capture from a series, where I would kind of expect to see the full animal and then maybe a zoom, and then you get the cropping like this, and just kind of creating like a storytelling captures where when you get just this part of the animal without any pictures next to it, it can come across just a little bit plain. I think you're kind of missing the rest of the story. Obviously it's incredible to capture the bird getting feed with what looks like a duck or some kind of other animal. However, I would probably like a little bit more of it to be there. The space in front is really nice. There are some pieces here of obviously maybe the rest of the animal also on. However, that's just kind of few thoughts of what you could do. Now, when it comes to post-processing, nothing much to add. Kind of harsh light. However, the white balance is quite natural. The saturation is good. I think the exposure brightness is good as well. So leave it there. There is a little bit of vignette visible in these corners. Obviously bringing the focus in the center and on the animal. So nothing much to add there other than really kind of focusing to making sure that everything is nice and sharp for the next time. So Cherie, thank you very much for sending us your photos. It's been a while, but we hope to look and see more pictures from you in the near future. Now moving on, the next photographer, Dan Walters. Dan, lots of different images. So we get some birds, then we have some landscape, birds and dog. So unfortunately we can only review 2 pictures per photographer per week. So let's have a look at it. We have this black and white photo, this flying guy right here, some beautiful sunset. So let's keep this one from the landscape part. And 1, 2, let's keep this one. Cool. So if you want me to review the other pictures, just send them over next week, 2 of them, and I will be more than happy to look at them. So this one as well, and this is where we are. So let's jump into it. Let's start by looking at the camera details on both of them. So same camera. This one doesn't really say what lens you use. However, from the settings, ISO 200, 65mm f11, 1/25th of a second. So ISO 200, obviously I'm assuming that with the speed of 1/25th second you are on tripod. So if you are on tripod and you're shooting a sunset landscape, always make sure that the ISO is on 100, or unless the camera doesn't allow you to do so, but ISO 100 is the golden goal, especially when it comes to landscape photography. When you use a tripod, I think it's a must. F11 is quite fine. Making sure everything is nice and sharp is always a good idea. And 1/25th of a second, I think if you would have gone a little bit slower, it would actually create nice, smooth water. However, 1/25th is still fine. Now, there is a quite decent sharpness all around it. There is a little bit of like a sun leak here and here, but that's about it. The sky is very, very nice with a little bit of noise in it. However, a nice texture on it, nice fluffy clouds. So very well done. Now let's look at this one. So this was, if I understand it right, the same camera. From the lens, this was 300mm lens. ISO 100, 420mm, so maybe use an extender. F4, 1/2500 of a second. So incredible capture of the bird flying through. Now, kind of very blurry background with this size of a lens and the f-stop. I'm not surprised. I'm surprised that you get any texture at all. The good thing is that the texture and the color is quite contrasted towards the actual image. However, when I look at the image, it almost looks like it's like a water paint. I don't know if you apply any effect to it or what happened, but it has these kind of bulk of colors on the top of it. It kind of lost a little bit the natural look. And also there are parts of the picture where you can really clearly see like a brushes here and here as well on the top and around the animal. So I don't know if you have kind of maybe took it away from the environment and place it on this. Maybe it needs a little bit more work in order to be good. I think the light is quite decent, kind of hitting the animal, creating some nice pleasant shadows is good. However, a little bit more work in the post-processing, I think. When it comes to composition, staying with this animal, it's quite good. Positive active space in front of the animal also really helps. I think the crop is just about tight enough for what you're trying to say, so that works really cool. Nice balance, clear subject, clear storytelling, so well done there. On this one, it's a little bit tricky because there is kind of lots happening in the foreground. So you have this epic sunset behind the mountains. And if I have to be honest, if you would have gone in front of the water, skip all of this and just took a picture of the water with the mountains and the sun, it would have probably been the best result. Simply because for example, if it would have been just this tree and all of this would have been gone, it would be also epic, but that's not the case. That's not how the scene was. So now you have a lot happening here. You have some kind of leftover of bushes from here. You have this kind of little bit of a mess. Then you have the tree, which is almost like a shadow. Then you have this green bushes here. So just lots happening where really the main subject is the beautiful sunset and water. So that would be just my suggestion. Now, when it comes to post-processing, I think one thing first, I would like to make sure that the horizon is straight. So that's one thing I would start with. Then obviously either the sun is a subject or the tree and sun. So you would probably crop away at least these bushes, crop it a little bit, maybe crop it a little bit here and get at least something like this to kind of get avoid of at least one bit. So I think one thing, just to have a look at the white balance, there is lots of kind of warmth happening here, but then there is lots of kind of cool turquoise colors here. So it looks almost like it was done locally, which is cool. However, you need to always make sure that it matches a little bit together. So that would be my suggestion there. Now, moving on this one in post-processing, just keep an eye on these brush strokes and how you can remove them. Really, that would be the start with, and also the selection. Some parts are just a little bit too visible, so that would be my suggestion there and my starting point for this picture. So anyway, thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your photos with us. It was a pleasure to review them done, and if you have more, make sure you send them to us in the future. Now, moving on the next photographer, we have a David. David, image of this building on the water, so probably from some kind of boat. And then this, which seems to be very, very blurry. So let's just look at this Apple iPhone. I don't know if I can zoom any further. No, I can't. David, as much as I would love to review this, it's so blurry, this thing, that I can't really tell you much about it. You probably maybe just need to export it again and send it in a different quality, or see what you can do with it so it doesn't, you see how pixelated is it, and when I zoom in, it's just become lots of pixels. So let's focus on this one. No details from the camera, which I think is a little bit of a shame. However, looking at it like this, obviously a sharpness on the building itself, which is really cool, but again, really pixelated. You see when I zoom in, the size of the file is only 258 kilobytes, means that it's really small and the details are almost gone. So just like kind of looking at it from here, there's a little bit of texture in the sky. The sharpness seems to be okay. However, this seems to be a little bit overexposed. So then kind of moving on a composition, you would want to make sure that the building is nice and straight, which can be done in basic geometry. So then you get at least something like this, or you can use the leading lines and kind of sort it from there and do maybe something like this and this. Then I would probably crop it a little bit tighter because it's a little bit unbalanced. You have this heavy thing, heavy colors, heavy building, and then empty space here. So maybe just crop a little bit of the top, a little bit of the bottom, and then definitely go tighter to kind of put this edge in the center. So then something like this would be it. And that's about it. Some nice leading lines, kind of main focal point, which is clear. So I always like that. But that's about from what I can see from here. And the post-processing, again, really tricky on this kind of image, since the quality isn't really great. You know, all in all, David, if you want to export your files and send them over again in a little bit bigger size, I think it would be really helpful, because then I will be able to tell you much more about them. However, this is very, very nice kind of cityscape with the river, good idea, but it would be great to see it in its full glory. Moving on, the next photographer, we have a Donna, and we have a two picture from Donna. So beautiful dogs in a movement, so probably greeting your world. However, also great contrast between the white dogs and a green background. So altogether on a beautiful, beautiful capture. And then this one, as I already messaged you, like this is a storytelling on the best, you know, really cool moment. Obviously, a fisherman reading his book with his friend here, and Donna already sent me the message explaining that obviously they look after the boats in the evening. So just great storytelling on this one. So let's have a look at them. Let's move to the camera details, and this was Nikon. So both of them same Nikons, Nikon D850. This one was lens 80-400, this ISO 500, 400 millimeters f11, 1/640th second. So obviously everything is nice and sharp, including the cut and the gentleman. Yep. 400 millimeters, so you are probably quite far. F11, so the sharpness is all the way through. ISO 500, this little bit visible. I mean, from kind of, even from far, you can kind of see it on his face and in the darker areas to start with, and then it's kind of visible all the way through. However, this is again a great example of where you know, I see often technically very good pictures, but the storytelling isn't there, so then all the technicality go really out of the window. This is where maybe the ISO could have been lower, maybe the f-stop could have been lower and create a little bit more depth, but as a storytelling picture, it's brilliant. Really, really love it. So technically, that's where I would leave it. On this one though, so same camera, different lens, 70 to 200 millimeters, ISO 800. We really need to work on the ISO for you, Donna, because 800 is again really high, 200 millimeter lens. Oh, I understand that. F8, 1/640th of a second to make sure that everything is sharp. However, on this one again, the boys or the dogs seems to be really nice and sharp, even in the movement. There is quite nice depth, obviously, with the ends of their bodies. So the sharpness is pretty much on their faces, which I think is really cool. The noise isn't as visible here. However, looking at the background, it seems like you have done some heavy post-processing there to make sure that there is no noise. There is also a little bit of leftover of some editing here, kind of leaking through. So just something to kind of keep an eye on. Other than that, it's cool. I quite like it. I like the softness here. It creates a little bit kind of minimal effect, and I think it works quite nicely. When it comes to composition, I think it's great. I love the contrast between their color and everything else around it. I think the combination of that white creamy together with the green creates a really lovely contrast. There is the movement, there is a space in front of them and around them, just enough. The cropping is quite nice. Just kind of making sure that you have the same amount on each side is always a good idea. And other than that, brilliant. Now, talking about this one, when it comes to composition, it's all about the storytelling. You could make sure that it's maybe a little bit more straight. However, the size on each side is good. Obviously, there is a certain pose. It's sending certain message, and it's very cool. Now, post-processing wise, let's just quickly check the white balance here. And I would definitely not add that much green, but maybe a bit more yellow, bringing down the exposure just a little, and then going in with the brush and just kind of adding a little bit of, you know, some of a dodge and burn, creating more of the contrast by ourselves rather than having everything evenly lit. I think is always a good idea. So something like this. And then it's always good to add a vignette, just to close it a little. Maybe one more vignette just to add the depth with the masking. No luminance, linear. So something like this, just to close. What am I doing? Create new mask, linear gradient, place one here. And yeah, this is what I wanted to do. There you go. And there you go. So something like this, just to kind of add a few touches. However, still loving the picture. Brilliant. Thank you so much. On this one, nothing much to add. The contrast is great. The colors are great. Just keeping an eye on the white balance on this one. If we do that, yeah, we get a little bit more natural colors. I wouldn't push the tint as much, but I think as always, when there is so much green on the image, always the camera start to kind of push the tint of the dominant color inside of the other shades. So let me show you before and after. You can see it on them when you look at them, really before and after. And this way, when you push the tint, what it does, it keeps the green where they're supposed to be, but takes it away from the areas where it's not supposed to be. So I think that works very, very well. Great picture again. Again, we could close it even further with some kind of minus exposure in the front. Something like this, and just leave it. Yeah, I mean, you could do with a brush, highlight their little faces, which you probably done mostly already, and there you go. Donna, thank you so much for sharing your pictures with us. It was a pleasure to review them as always. Take care, and if you have more of them, make sure you send them soon to us. And the next photographer is Fotini. Fotini, we have two images here, and a little bit confused about what we're looking at on this one. This one is very kind of focused, dark, special selection. Fotini, I'm gonna just tell you very artistically what I think about it. Really, I can't. It's not really a point to go through it with the usual kind of review, because they are very specific. So just kind of looking at it. Let's have a look. Camera, Canon 250D. And then just kind of out of the both of them, ISO 200, f4.5 here, so creating nice kind of bokeh and really nice depth. On this one, f6.3, 1/15 of a second. I'm just not sure what we're looking at on this one really, so it's a bit difficult for me to help you. I can open it and it's some kind of trees over the lake. When I open it just a little, obviously with some maybe a reflection or something, but it's so kind of dark that it's really tricky to say. It's almost like a pinhole capture you're trying to do here. However, I'm not sure if it was done through technical or mechanical part, or if it was trying to do it through like a Lightroom or editing software. Well, on this one, it's kind of interesting. There is obviously the water coming out. It's kind of some kind of tube. Again, if we would just open it just to understand a bit more, there's no more details. So it's kind of artistically very nice. There is a visible noise. You can see it like this here, which I think is a little bit of a shame. It's kind of monotone pictures. I think it really helps. It almost creates kind of black and white feel to it, and I think that works quite nicely here. So all in all, quite nicely done. Nice effect, but it's just something, it's difficult really for me to judge. It's very artistic and it's very subjective, so it's interesting. This one I'm really not sure, because look at it, it just looks like lots of editing, which doesn't necessarily completely make sense for me. And on this one, I think I really like it. I like what it does and looks like with the bokeh and everything. I think it looks cool. On this one, I think it's a little bit too contrasty, a little bit of it, so just not 100% sure. Fotini, I'm really sorry that I can't help you more with those. You will probably have to find somebody else who can help with these abstract, subjective themes. However, still, thank you very much for sending them over. It was a pleasure to see them. And now moving on the next photographer, we have a Guido. Guido, we have two images for you. One is this lovely capture with the dog and this stunning portrait of this lady. So let's have a look at it. Starting by looking at the camera details. So both of them with Nikon D500, lens 28 to 300 millimeters on both as well. And then just from a camera setting right here, ISO 200, 300 millimeters, f5.6, 1/320th of a second. Now, from the kind of settings, as always, you know, trying to keep the ISO to 100 as much as possible is always a good key. f5.6 with 300 millimeters is probably fine. It gives you a nice blur at the back, with the softness at the back of the animal, creating quite nice depth. 1/320th of a second, making sure that everything is nice and sharp. So technically, I think this is very well done. Now moving on this one, ISO 800, so quite high ISO, so then it really question how did you capture it, probably kind of lower light situation. However, I have to say the light is very pleasant, kind of coming from this side, creating a little bit of a shadow in this side as well, and all in all, creating very lovely capture of an image. Now, technically, I think it's nicely done. The sharpness and eye is great. Of course, there's a little bit of the noise visible. However, the separation from the background, the color contrast, I think it all works better here, and technically I think it's well handled. Now, when we talk about composition, I think this is great. The kind of head posture really works here. The active space left on this side, I think, works very well as well. She's just a little bit off center, which is a great technique for composition as well. And altogether, I think composition, it really works. The color contrast is there. The nice light is there. The position is fine. The cropping and framing is good. So all in all, good. Now on this one, I think for me, it's a little bit too tight. Obviously the dog pointing at this side, there's just not enough space here for me to take it. So I wish there was a little bit more size for him to kind of create a little bit more impact with the movement. Now, when we talk about post-processing, I'm really just distracted with the purple because I can't imagine what he would be sitting in front of to be so purple like this. Maybe you can write me in a comment to say what it was. It's just the mixture of the colors together, which is a little bit of distracting. I think if we would turn it to black and white, suddenly you get this really nice bouquet, the colors stop distracting you, and you have something a bit more powerful. However, in that case, I would be looking at creating more space on the side. I would also crop it, if you're cropping it, maybe just a little bit tighter and get at least something like this with a little bit more vignette, maybe creating something a little bit more powerful. Now on this one, post-processing, I have nothing to add here. I think it's a great capture, very natural edit, natural colors, nice saturation, however, still keeping it very realistic. And this is beautiful portrait, excellent capture, and I love it. So definitely be happy about this one. This one is something a little bit different, but still very cool. Guido, it's always pleasure to see your photos. Thank you so much for sending them to us. And if you have more, make sure you send them in the future. Moving on, the next photographer, we have a Ken. Ken, let's have a look at what we have from here. So this really nice sunset with some silhouette trees and beautiful colors. And then we have this lovely flying bird. So let's have a look at it. Let's have a look at the camera details. So this was again with your popular favorite Nikon Coolpix P1000, ISO 100, 29mm, 27.9mm, f4, 1/800 of a second. So let's have a look at it. This silhouette-like effect looks really cool. I think there's plenty of sharpness, which is really nice, and I really like lots of texture in the sky as well. One thing to keep an eye on is the sensor dust, which I just see one pig here, so I'm not too crazy about it. There is a little tutorial in the description where you can learn how to remove this. And that's about it. So technically quite nicely done, very kind of silhouette-like capture, which is very powerful and very nice. Now talking about the animal, there's a nice sharpness around the head and this part of the body, and also around the leg, with a little bit of a movement of the body. That's quite nice, quite cool, and also some drops coming down. So very well done there. Let's have a look at the camera again. Same camera, ISO 100, f5, 1/400 of a second. So obviously 1/400 of a second, it's a little bit more soft than I would hope so, but there's still some nice sharpness. ISO 100 is always a good choice as well, and the colors are a little bit off as well. I wonder why, but we can look at that in editing. Now when it comes to composition, just kind of making sure that everything is nice and straight. So I would just, and I wonder if we need all the thing on the bottom, so maybe just a little bit more like this, and that's where I would leave it. There is plenty space in front of it for the bird to fly in. Obviously the main subject is clear can, so well done there. Now when it comes to this one, I think definitely different cropping and mostly making sure that the horizon is straight. So just turn it around like this to make sure that it's straight would be my first thing. Then bring down a little bit of the sky, which I think will help as well. And definitely a little bit more of the bottom, because what we want to show is the sky and this tree here. Now, if these trees wouldn't be here, it would be even cooler. But like this, still, it's very, very nice. So we have a 2/3 of the sky, 1/3 of the land, which is composition-wise very nice and balanced. It's very powerful and very, very nice. Now, when we come to post-processing, I really like it. I like the fact that it's almost like a silhouette look with very powerful, very saturated sky, but very, very nice. Now, when we talk about this one, let's have a look at the white balance. Right here, so a little bit less yellow, but probably somewhere around here purple. I would actually bring exposure up a little, make it a little bit brighter, maybe a little bit of contrast, and I would in color bring down the saturation just a touch and bring up the vibrance, and that's where I would leave it. Now you can obviously make a little vignette or focus like this, but this is very natural and a lovely result. Anyway, both of them are very interesting. It's actually really nice to see from you a little bit of landscape as well, Ken, so it's always a pleasure. Take care, stay safe, and if you have more pictures, make sure you share with them here or also in a group as you always do. And then the final photographer, when it comes to mixed photography, we have a Myree. We have two pictures here. One is almost like your kind of travel photography capture, which I think is very, very cool. And then we have this animal right here. I would say chipmunk, but I don't think it is chipmunk. So let's move to it. Let's have a look at the camera details. So Nikon Coolpix P600 on both of them. Now this one, when it comes to camera setting, ISO 280, f5.6, 1/250th of a second. So ISO 280, just keep an eye on it. As low as you can is always the goal. You want to go for 100 all day, every day. Obviously, a little bit of noise created with it. When I zoom in like this, you see it's not 100% sharp, but that can often be also created by the transition into the JPEG, so don't worry about it too much. Now, the shutter speed, I think, seems to be good, unless the animal was moving super fast. f5.6 as well, because it creates nice blurry background. So all in all, technically quite well done. There is a movement in the animal. Very, very good. Now, talking about this one, it's a lovely documentary-like travel capture with this kind of blur added in post-processing because it's a little bit visible. However, kind of interesting light when it comes to setting ISO 100, f3.3, 1/160th of a second. 1/160th of a second gave you this kind of quite sharp image, which I quite like in these areas anyway. ISO 100 again kept any noise away. However, I think the main thing which is really standing out for me is the blur applied very much locally, but leaving these kind of areas where it's just a little bit too visible. So Myree, that would be my main thing I would look at, and it's to how to work with the blur and how to not have it as visible as it is right here. Now, when it comes to composition and storytelling, I absolutely love this. I think this foreground kind of opened the scene. It is really clear about what is the woman doing. Then there is the main woman. The crop is great. She is right on the third. Little bit of the blur at the background, I think, really kind of isolate the subject and makes it a little bit more clean. And I think it's very, very cool. On this one, to be honest, I wish there would be more space in front of the animal. I think it would help in overall. Adding a little bit more space and make it a little bit more free is always good. If there wouldn't be this grass, I think that would be great as well. So I don't know if you could remove it in a post-processing, in a Photoshop or something like this, but I think it would make the whole subject a little bit cleaner. When it comes to post-processing, on this one, keep an eye on your white balance. You can see before, after. Anytime there is an image where there are dominant colors like blues, greens, orange is quite normal, but blues and greens are the main ones. If there is a lot of them, what the camera does, it starts to actually push the color in other shades of the image. So let me show you before and after, and you can see how even parts of the animals were green, and this really helped. Now, obviously, a little vignette goes a long way to add a little bit more focus on the animal. And that's about it. Now, talking on this one, really without doing anything else, I think you need to look at the local application of the blur, because it just needs to be done a little bit more careful than it is. It's a bit too visible. Here are parts where you kind of went over, then there are parts where there is a lot of space around where you didn't, and that's what I would start with. So Myree, thank you very much for sending us your photos. It was a pleasure to review them, and if you want, make sure to send us more pictures in the future. And the same goes for all of you folks. If you want to join us for the next episode of our photography review show, all you need to do is to head to our website, cleverphotographer.com/review, and there you can find all the upcoming dates, all the links where you can upload your photos, and all the information you need to join us already for the next week episode. Thank you very much for joining me today. Take care, and until next time, keep shooting.